Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those of you joining in from Europe or India or other parts of the world. Uh, let's get started here. We are presenting today a webinar titled Fit for Purpose, How Modern Businesses Find, Satisfy, and Keep Customers. And this webinar is being brought to you by Lead Kanban Inc. and Swift Kanban from Digite. Let me get started with some agenda and housekeeping, and we'll get going with the webinar. It's a simple structure. Quick word from the sponsor. Before that, some introductions, and then I will hand over the mic here to David Anderson for the main webinar. And then hopefully we will have a very good Q&A session at the end. It's an interesting and new topic that David has been talking about now for some months. And I think a number of you come from organizations that are in the business of delivering products and services to your respective markets, and how do you do that successfully? How do you keep your customers happy and successful and successfully retained? And how do you measure your success? Those are some of the key things that David will be talking about in the webinar. The webinar is being recorded, so we no need to take feverish notes. We will share the recording of the webinar once it is done within a couple of days. And we will take the Q&A, the questions using the Q&A box. You should see it on the right side of your screens in the GoToWebinar panel that you'll see. With that, let me get started with the introductions. David Anderson is the chairman of Lean Kanban Inc. My name is Mahesh Singh, and I'm head of marketing at Digite. And I've been associated with David for a very long time, and it's been my pleasure and honor. For those of you who don't know David, I suppose there are still some people on the webinar who might not have heard him or seen him closely. Just want to give you guys a quick background of David. He is, of course, the originator of the Kanban method and lately the enterprise services planning body of knowledge. And I must apologize, I'm in a slightly noisy environment, so you might once in a while hear a little bit of background noise here, and I apologize in advance for that. David is, of course, the pioneer of the use of Kanban systems for knowledge work and services delivery, and he's authored several books, including, of course, the one that's considered the Bible of Kanban, which is Kanban Successful Evolutionary Change for your Technology Business. And of course, David is a management trainer and a consultant and a very popular conference speaker, thought leader, and presenter. Before I turn over the mic to him, just a quick introduction to Digite and Swift Kanban. So Digite has been in business since 2002, and we provide web-based solutions for collaboration, product development, project management for geographically distributed teams. Recorded out of Cupertino, California. Some of you might be familiar with the place. It's also the headquarters of Apple, and we are in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have over actually 750,000 users by now of our products across the world, which cover Lean Kanban, Agile ALM, project portfolio management type of work, DevOps, etc. And of course, Swift Kanban is our flagship Lean Kanban product. Swift Kanban has been around now for several years and has been very successfully adopted by a variety of different organizations. Our leading customers typically tend to be software engineering and IT organizations. And of course, Kanban has been very widely adopted by those people. But it also is adopted by a variety of business functions, whether it's marketing or procurement or HR or legal. A variety of different functions have also adopted Kanban and use Swift Kanban in their business functions to improve their service delivery and cycle times, performance, and quality. And of course, we have a fairly large base of people using Swift Kanban for our personal Kanban purposes, and we have different use cases for that, including a template that we provide for planning a big event that you might find on Swift Kanban if you try it. We are very well known for our analytics, and actually one of the key differentiators for Swift Kanban is just the wide range of analytics that support the Lean Kanban method. We support that and provide some interesting insights into your teams and organization performance. And hopefully some of you are already familiar with that. And then a last slide here, just a quick look at some of our key customers, and you will recognize a number of these names and brands. We use by a variety of organization sizes, from very small to very, very large, and we're very proud to be a real, rich solution provider in this space. So with that, let me hand over the control to David. David, I'm going to make you presenter here. You should see a prompt on your screen now.
I do. So I'm not sure whether I should select the application or the screen. Let's try the application first, and you can tell me if it's working properly.
Okay. I can see your slides in a sorter mode. There you go.
You can see it? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This latest webinar on Fit for Purpose, I'm sure that some of you have followed my work for quite a few years, and you may recognize some material from keynote speeches from 2 or 3 years ago, and perhaps even a few slides from some Swift Kanban webinars from about 2 years ago. So Fit for Purpose, the concept came about from clients asking, how do we know whether a change is actually an improvement? How would we measure improvements? And how would we know if we're going in the right direction? And that the answer to that lay in evolutionary biology theory, the concept that if you have a mutation of a species, the new version survives and thrives if it's fitter for its environment. So how would you determine whether your service delivery, your project environment, the process you're using in the workplace is fitter than it was before you made a change? And answering that question led me and some collaborators down a path which resulted in this latest material, which goes beyond just Kanban and provision of service delivery. It's really about business strategy and product management, strategic planning, product planning, how modern businesses find, satisfy, and keep customers. But first of all, a little story about the picture here of our London taxi driver about to pick up a passenger. And the black taxi in the picture, the black cab, is made by a company called LTI, or London Taxi International. And as an automotive supplier, they are tiny. They have no economy of scale. They really have no justification for continuing to exist in a market where there's ever larger suppliers of vehicles and fewer competitors. Big companies like Volkswagen Audi Group and Fiat Chrysler, Ford, General Motors, Toyota, Honda, you've heard of all of these names. And yet this very tiny manufacturer manages to survive. And they survive because they make a product which is uniquely tailored for its environment, and as a consequence it fetches a premium price. The taxi driver here, who's quite likely an owner-operator, he bought the black cab with his own money, and he runs his own independent business, and he was prepared to pay about twice the price of an equivalent vehicle with a similar functional specification, because what we have here is a 7-seat utility vehicle, so equivalent of a 7-seat SUV with a diesel engine, and in this example one of the seats, the front passenger seat, is removed. So there's space for 5 passengers in the back of the cab and the driver in the front, but it's basically a utility vehicle with a diesel engine. And why would this cabbie here have paid twice as much as he might have paid if he'd walked into a dealership at, say, Volkswagen and bought himself a 7-seat sports utility vehicle from their showroom? So the answer is the unique tailoring to the environment. That not only is there a history and the shape, the image it projects is iconic, but for many years these vehicles evolved for their environment of driving around London, narrow old city streets. They have a very tight turning radius. They have a very low floor, and although this example, the passenger is obviously a businessman running from one meeting to another, what if you were a tourist, you had suitcases? Well, you open the door, you load the suitcases into the passenger area of the vehicle. The taxi driver doesn't necessarily have to get out to help you. He may have had to make a U-turn in a very narrow street. He may have pulled up and parked in an area where parking is not allowed. And the ability to load and unload the taxi very quickly, to get people in and out, to avoid the need for the taxi driver to get out and assist. These are just some of the aspects that make this vehicle uniquely tailored to its environment. Meanwhile, the driver himself is a member of the London Taxi Drivers Association, the LTDA. He's a certified taxi driver. He spent 2 years studying to become a taxi driver, and he passed an exam. And that whole process is known as the knowledge. And at the point where he's licensed to drive a London taxi, he knows the entire map of London in his head. There's no GPS in a London taxi. The GPS is between the driver's ears, in his head, his brain. And as a consequence of all this training, London taxi drivers, they actually have an enlarged hippocampus inside their brain. The part of the brain that does spatial reasoning is enlarged because they've spent so long training themselves to know the entire map of London. And the combination of both the taxi, the vehicle, the LTI cab, and the taxi driver make this the best taxi service in the world. The maneuverability of the vehicle, the knowledge of the taxi driver, their ability to respond to traffic jams and other events like protest marches, the network of the taxi drivers, it's a very tightly knit social group, very high barrier to entry, very high professional standards, and very safe as a consequence, that they pride themselves in their professionalism. So the safest, best, fastest, most flexible taxi service in the world. And the product of evolution, the product of constantly being challenged over what is approximately 300 years. Since the beginning of the 20th century, they've been motorized. They've had some electric motors in the early days, then the diesel-powered engines later in the 20th century. And altogether, several hundred years of evolution producing the vehicle and the driver and the standards and the certification and, to be honest, some bureaucracy that goes with it. But the net effect is the best taxi service in the world. So uniquely evolved for its environment, fittest for purpose. So what's the value of this? What's it illustrating for us? Well, the question would be, how would you emulate something like that for your own business? How would you be the fittest for purpose? And why is it important? Well, perhaps a disruptive innovation comes along. Perhaps an upstart business like Uber comes along, offering taxi hailing with mobile applications and ride sharing, where anyone with a car can become an Uber driver and compete with the black cabs in London. Well, the black cab service is proving remarkably resilient and robust against insurgents because it is already so uniquely tailored to its environment. The only advantage that Uber really offers in London is cheaper prices. On the other hand, they're not nearly as safe. The vehicles aren't as flexible or maneuverable. And for many users, the black cab it offers superior service at albeit a slightly higher price. So if we look at this, the London taxi, the vehicle, the LTDA vehicle, that's the product component here. It has a design and implementation as a product. And then we have the service delivery component, the driver who picks you up, drives you from one location to another. This image has been used on this preliminary copy of my new book. Together with Alexei Zheglov, I spent the summer writing this, and this presentation is really a summary of that book. The book altogether is 91,000 words, and all I can really do today is give you a flavour of what's in it, but you'll get the key essence of what represents fit for purpose. And as I mentioned at the beginning, focused on product management, strategic planning. And this example is what's known as a galley copy in publishing. And we distributed these at the Lean Kanban India and Lean Kanban Spain conferences last month. So very unique, basically beta version of the book. The finished book is likely to look different and should be available in November. So we'll start by understanding fit for purpose and what would it mean for you. And to do that, we're going to tell the story of this fictitious lady here called Neeta, who works as a project manager. And when you're reading the book, you'll discover that she works for a public sector organization in the province of Ontario and in the city of Toronto in Canada, where she leads an IT team who develop website applications for that workplace safety organization. And her team have a release coming up at the end of the week on the weekend. They're a little behind schedule. They're still fixing some bugs. There is some anxiety about whether the release can be made on time. And the team are working some overtime for a couple of nights, hoping to catch up and get everything on schedule. And Neeta decides that she has to feed the team who are working late in the evening, and she's going to order pizza in order to do this. So she's going to select a pizza delivery service to deliver pizza for her team. And we might want to examine the criteria she uses for selecting the service, the pizza restaurant she's going to use. Delivery time, how long are her geeks willing to wait for their pizza? Well, they're probably pretty busy working. They hardly notice what time it is in the evening, and therefore an hour might be sufficient. And frankly, if she ordered 2 hours in advance, that might be okay. They're heads down bug fixing. Non-functional quality, what do we mean by that? We mean the substance of the pizza, whether it's hot and tasty on delivery, whether it's well baked and it has nice quality ingredients. And certainly her team, they like their pizza tasty and hot. So if it left the restaurant tasty and hot, but it showed up at her office and it was already cold, that wouldn't be an ideal situation. And she doesn't have the facility to reheat the pizzas. So in order to be tasty and hot, we might expect some speedy delivery. The functional quality, the order accuracy. Well, she has a 10 pizza team. There's 30 people on this team, and she'll be ordering 10 pizzas. And therefore, would it matter if one pizza was something other than she specified? She has a few vegetarians in her department, and therefore she might expect that there must be some vegetarian pizza in the order. Of the 10 pizzas she's ordering, 4 are vegetarian. If no vegetarian pizzas turned up, she'll be unhappy. But if one pizza out of 10 wasn't as specified, that's no problem. Small mistakes are okay. Her team will eat any flavour of pizza, providing the vegetarians are accommodated. What about the predictability? She called, she placed the order, and she said, how long will it take? And they said, oh, about an hour. Well, what's her tolerance for variation from that time? And we think maybe plus or minus 30 minutes. Who knows, maybe even a little longer, plus 1 hour, minus 30 minutes. That would be fine. And safety. Does Neeta care whether the pizza delivery boy breaks some traffic rules when he's delivering the pizza? Probably not. On the other hand, does she care about health and safety standards at the restaurant? Yes, she does. Now, she's not in a position to validate those for herself. She has no means of verification, but she trusts the local authorities in the City of Toronto that they inspect the restaurant regularly and that the health and safety standards are met. So as long as she trusts in the system, everything's fine. She'll place the order. Now things get back on track at the project, more or less, and by Friday night, she's actually able to go home, albeit perhaps an hour to 2 hours later than usual. The release is scheduled for the weekend. She's looking forward to a little relaxation on Friday night. And it turns out Neeta has 4 children. And she gets home. The babysitter has been there since the kids came home from school. They've had some snacks, but they haven't been fed dinner. And there was some uncertainty about when Neeta was returning. Meanwhile, she's been working very hard all week. She hasn't done grocery shopping. She's very tired. It's been a stressful time at the office. And she thinks, you know what? I don't do this very often, but maybe I'm going to order pizza for the kids. And now she has to select a restaurant for this different usage, different purpose. Not her team of geeks working on the project, but in this case, her family, 4, 6, 9, and 11 years old. What does she care about in terms of selection criteria? The delivery time. Well, the kids are hungry, their patience is short, their tolerance is little, and perhaps 20 minutes would be good. Non-functional quality. Do the children care whether the pizza is hot and tasty on delivery? Doesn't matter too much. It's pizza. It's exciting. Mommy ordered pizza for dinner. That doesn't happen very often. What about the functional quality, the order accuracy? Well, the kids are a 1 pizza team, and 1 pizza is being ordered, and the 4-year-old only eats cheese pizza. So it's a plain cheese and tomato pizza, and if it turned up with pepperoni on it, what's the reaction from the children? The younger ones particularly are going to be very unhappy, even if Neeta takes the pepperoni off. So she requires that it's precisely a cheese pizza and nothing else, but it doesn't matter too much if it's a little cold on delivery. Predictability. What's the kids' tolerance? 20 minutes plus or minus how much? Maybe 5 minutes. Because now they've been promised pizza, they're very excited. And if more than 5 minutes goes by, the likelihood is that there'll be some kind of emotional meltdown. Meanwhile, what about the safety? Well, for Neeta it's paramount, but from the kid's perspective, only mommy worries about that stuff. So what we see from this is that Neeta has two roles as part of her identity, and on 2 different nights of the week she orders pizza, and it may well be that because of these the different usage scenarios, the different expectations of the consumer, she might order from different restaurants. She needs fast, accurate service from one, but it doesn't need to be exotic. It's plain cheese pizza, and it doesn't matter too much if it's not in pristine condition when it shows up. On the other hand, for the geeks at the office, they want gourmet flavors. They want it hot and tasty on arrival, but they don't mind if it takes a bit longer. So if we think about this a little more, we'll realize that there are 3 aspects to the service that Neeta's selecting. There is the design, the implementation, and the service delivery. The design is the menu, the different pizzas on offer, the concept of the restaurant. The implementation is how good are we at making pizza. So design is functional specification. What pizzas are available, what flavors, what recipes, what ingredients. While implementation is what's the quality of those ingredients, how fresh were they organic or not. What about the pizza base? Was that hand thrown at the restaurant? Is it a thick or a thin crust pizza? Are we good at baking it? Do we make nice pizza? And then the service delivery, how fast, how predictable, how good, how nice are the pizzas on delivery? What's the quality of them? And all 3 of these aspects matter to Neeta, even if she doesn't think about it explicitly. If the service delivery is poor and unpredictable, that might not be acceptable, or if the implementation is poor, that might not be acceptable. There is essentially a blend of all 3 of these aspects, and they all need to be good enough before she will even consider giving them the business. So the lesson here is that businesses need to learn to segment the market based on customer purpose. Neeta's identity as project manager and mother, they represent different market segments because she has different criteria for selecting pizza depending on these different scenarios. Traditional demographic, income group-based customer segmentation, market segmentation, it doesn't accurately capture this. It doesn't capture the difference in purpose. So traditional marketers would treat Neeta as one segment, and then they wouldn't understand why she buys from them in one circumstance and not in another, or that they only get half of her pizza business and not all of it. So if we understand that principle, what have we learned so far? There's a design, an implementation, and service delivery, and that customers have a purpose, and that purpose varies based on context and the role they're playing in their life, and that we need to think about market segments based on purpose. And given that purpose, there will be design, implementation, and service delivery criteria that will cause the customer to select our product or service. Given all of that, we're inside the business and we would like to drive behavior that makes us fitter for purpose, that wins us more of Neeta's business. How might we do that? Well, traditionally organizations, certainly since the early 1990s, they've been encouraged to determine these key performance indicator metrics, or KPIs. And many of you may have KPIs. They may be on your balanced scorecard. They may be on your SMART goals for the year and your annual annual bonus or the prospect of promotion may be determined based on your ability to deliver or hit your key performance indicators. Well, what should a KPI really mean? What are the KPIs for pizza delivery? What makes pizza delivery fit for purpose? Well, what we saw before is delivery time, quality, both functional and non-functional, predictability of the delivery time, and safety or conformance to regulatory requirements. And depending on Neeta's circumstances, she has different threshold levels for each of these. Key performance indicators, they should indicate selection by the customer, satisfaction in other words. I choose you because you meet this level of service, this level of implementation, this level of functionality and design that is acceptable to me. Therefore, a key performance indicator suggests both success and survivability, customer loyalty. I keep selecting you because you meet my criteria, you meet the thresholds that are acceptable to me, and as a consequence, I'm a loyal customer. Fitness criteria are means by which customers determine whether your product or service is fit for purpose. All key performance indicators should be fitness criteria, because if they're not, it's not a key performance indicator. It may be some other kind of performance indicator, but it's not key. It's not determining whether your business is thriving and surviving, whether you're being successful. It's not determining satisfaction and loyalty. All fitness criteria have threshold levels below which the product's unfit for purpose. Neeta will recognize pizza that's unfit for purpose on delivery, and she may think twice about placing her business with the same restaurant. The delivery time might have been too long, or over a repeated set of occurrences, delivery is unpredictable, or the quality is wrong, the order accuracy is wrong, or the pizza is cold on delivery, or it's not tasty. Or simply, she may not select a restaurant because she doesn't like their menu. They don't have the recipes that she likes, or that her team like, or her family or kids like. There's also a second threshold level beyond which the customer's being overserved. Now, they might describe this as delighted. I'm really surprised that your level of service was so good and wonderful. But actually, if that cost you extra money, you may not be working economically efficiently. So there are two threshold levels for fitness criteria, the minimum one below which you're unfit, and a higher level one beyond which you're over-serving. There are some other types of metrics, and we're going to examine these a little bit more. Improvement drivers, general health indicators, and vanity metrics. So what's an improvement driver? It's used to drive and measure an improvement initiative, and it has a target which you have to achieve over time through improvements by changing how you do things, the processes you use, the skills that you have, your capabilities. If you improve those, you will hit the target, and the outcome should be, there should be some link between an improvement driver and a fitness criteria. If you hit the improvement target, in theory, your fitness criteria metric should improve. General health indicators used to monitor health and stability of a business. They have a range within which no action is required. In other words, you expect some fluctuation. Now, general health indicators also exist for us as people, as human beings. You have a pulse, and you might expect your pulse to vary somewhere between, say, 50 and 150 per minute. And if it falls below that range or it's above that range, that would be dangerous for your health. So if you're monitoring it regularly, and this might happen if you're in hospital, you're lying in the bed and they've wired you up and they have a machine there, and it's monitoring a number of vital signs, one of which is your pulse, and it's programmed to trigger an alarm for the nurses in the event that your pulse falls below a certain level or exceeds a certain upper limit. Health indicators have a normal, healthy range. One other thing we might care about is that if there's a sudden dramatic change, say your pulse is fluctuating around 120 and then it suddenly dropped to 70 or 80, 30 or 40 beat per minute change instantly. Well, that might be something that we care about. Why did that happen? And is it indicating some change in the environment, some change in the condition of your health, which if we don't address it rapidly, it might, if it's you personally, it might affect your ability to continue living. So businesses have general health indicators, things like the cash register ringing. If we don't hear it ringing, nobody's buying anything. In other words, we don't have a pulse. And if that was to continue for long enough, we'd be dead. Our business would have to close down. General health indicators are not fitness criteria. Vanity metrics. These are metrics that you might like to measure. They make you feel good. You might use them as a boast. You might put them on your website and say, hey, look at our score on this metric. We're so wonderful. I got off an airplane a couple of days ago and the flight attendant proudly announced that the airline was the most punctual airline in the world. And punctuality for airlines usually means on-time departure. Well, I'm a lot more concerned about on-time arrival than I am so much about on-time departure. And the fact that the airline felt the need to boast about this metric is an indication to me that for them it's a vanity metric. Vanity metrics often play to cultural or identity-related aspects of a business. They're usually not actionable. They have no impact on business outcomes because customers like me don't care. They don't predict selection or survivability, they don't drive improvements, and they have no specific or meaningful targets. More is always better. A good indication of a vanity metric is you ask someone, so what's the threshold level for this, or what target are you trying to hit? And they're like, yeah, it doesn't matter, more's always better. It's a vanity metric. These are best illustrated by example. So in the book we get into some more detail on this example, but you'll recognize this photograph here from a GT car manufacturer assembly line, and this is a European sports car manufacturer. And some years ago now, they had a customer dissatisfaction issue. It was taking too long to deliver cars from the point where they were ordered, and customers were getting impatient and eventually cancelling their order. So in 2009, the cancellation rate had risen to a historically high level, and this was unacceptable to the manufacturer. At that time, the delivery time was 27 months. So from the point where a customer had placed an order to receiving their new vehicle had taken 2 years and 3 months. And this waiting period was clearly unacceptable to some of the customer base. They were cancelling their orders. So the manufacturer decided they had to speed up the production. They had to make cars faster. They had to make this assembly line move a little faster than it had been historically. So they increased the production rate. Increasing the production rate, of course, shortens the waiting time. And they continued with this until the order cancellation rate had fallen to its normal historical residual level. So to put this in the language of the fit for purpose framework, what we have is a customer fitness criteria, which is lead time to delivery. I placed my order. How long do I have to wait? 27 months is unacceptable. Some customers cancel their orders, and the manufacturer measures that as the cancellation rate. During the period of improvement, 2009 and 10, they set the objective that cancellation rate should return to its historical residual level. That was the target. So cancellation rate is the improvement driver. And in order to achieve it, we need to speed up production. And we measure that with production rate, or the cycle time of vehicles exiting the assembly line. Production rate and cycle time being the reciprocal metric of each other. So we want to increase production rate in order to reduce the cancellation rate and reduce the lead time to delivery. So the production rate's a health indicator. If we're healthy enough, we should be able to increase production rate. We should be able to see that happen, monitor it. We want to keep it within a reasonable range. And the target, of course, is that our production rate is higher than our order arrival rate, so that gradually we're reducing our backlog of orders, we're shrinking the delivery time, and we should see the cancellation rate return to normal. So lead time in this example is the fitness criteria, cancellation rate's the improvement driver, and production rate is the general health indicator. Which is on this slide. All right, so how would you determine these metrics to drive your improvements? How would you know what your customers want, what they want in terms of features, what they expect in terms of implementation, non-functional quality, and what they expect in terms of service delivery? Who knows your customers best? Well, the answer is frontline staff. In a pizza restaurant, it's the delivery staff who meet the customers, delivering the pizzas. It's the people who answer the phones and take the customer's order. In any business, the people who know the customers best are the frontline staff who meet with customers. And in order to be able to sense your market, to sense what the customers want, what are their acceptable fitness criteria thresholds, then you need to be able to gather information from your front line. You have to train the frontline staff. They need to be trained to chat the customers up a bit, learn the customer's purpose, learn the expectations the customer has, the outcomes that they want, and probe for their acceptable levels of service. What do they find acceptable? What do they not find acceptable? In physical businesses like pizza delivery, it's often the lowest paid staff, and they often have the shortest tenure. Many of these traditional physical industries don't value their front line. They don't value the information gathering potential of it. In a business like mine, a professional services business, training business, we have professionally qualified staff, university educated staff as our front line, people delivering training. And therefore, they're actually very highly paid, and they often work for us for years, in some cases almost a decade already. So it's less of a challenge in a business like mine, a professional services business. It's not difficult for me to educate trainers who work with me to find time to talk to the clients, to talk to the attendees in classes and gather information. Well, once your frontline have that information, what should they do with it? Well, there is a need to gather your frontline people together and tell some stories. Let's hear the narrative. Let's do some clustering of those narratives. Let's see if we can identify common themes. And this particular flip chart in this photograph is from one of our strategic planning sessions about 4 or 5 years ago now for a Lean Kanban University training brand. And this shows that the labels that we gave to 6 customer segments, and the nicknames are all-ins, bit hedgers, get rich quick, long-term committed, corporate girl and boy scouts, and aspirationals, which you might see in parentheses there says career hedgers. People who are managing the risk in their own personal career and focused on themselves rather than necessarily on their employer's needs. At the time, our existing partners or channel partners, perhaps companies that you work with around the world on Kanban training, each of them had a story that would fit into one of these 6 segments. Right, so once you've got the segmentation, that segmentation is based on an understanding of the customer's purpose, what they are trying to do, what they're trying to achieve, what they want from us as a business. That helps us understand how to tune what we're offering, the design, in our case the curricula that we offer, the individual class materials, the individual curriculum, the class materials, the supporting materials, the training offerings, the train the trainer, and other support events we do like Kanban leadership retreats, which are designed to enable our network of trainers and coaches to level up and to build their own self-support network amongst each other in order to maintain quality standards. So based on our understanding of different segments, we can decide which features we need to amplify, we need to do better, where we need to improve, things perhaps where we're already over-serving the market and we can ease off a little. Right, so it's the pizza boy here who knows Neeta's story. Right, so the staff who meet your customers, you need to train them and create ways to capture the stories. And the way we do that is something called a fit-for-purpose review, where you get together the staff and you have them tell the stories. Perhaps you organize an off-site meeting, perhaps it's a whole day, and you cater it, you make it a relaxing situation. You do this regularly, maybe every 3 months, and you capture the narrative. Now, if you're doing it regularly, the first time you'll capture a lot of new segments. In future times, what you're looking for is a delta, any emerging new segments that you have, narratives you haven't heard before. And is that a one-off customer, or is it becoming a pattern? Right. So listen to the stories. Do they map to existing customer segmentation, or do you see some new ones emerging? And then based on the story, can you determine some fitness criteria in terms of the design, the implementation, and the service delivery, which features, functions, and performance levels is the customer expecting? And do you currently meet those? What's the gap? What are the things that are missing? Do you care about that segment? Is it a profitable segment or potentially profitable? Should you be pursuing it? Therefore, should you have an improvement initiative to go after it? If it's design, then you need a new release of your product. with new features. If it's implementation, you need to improve your capability. You need to bake a nicer pizza, throw a nicer pizza dough, maybe invest in new pizza ovens to make that possible. Or is it service delivery? Are you simply too slow and too unpredictable? Do you need to improve your processes and your workflow in order to deliver faster and with greater predictability? All of that can come as a consequence of a fit-for-purpose review. And once you understand who are our customers, how do they segment, what are the fitness criteria, you can drive that directly into product planning and product management decisions. It's not always possible to do this with frontline staff. You might be in a line of business where there isn't a lot of customer touch. For example, you make a mobile application and the customer downloads it from the App Store onto their mobile phone, and there's never a human interaction between some of your staff and the customer. You've no idea what their purpose is. You've no idea why they're using your product or how they're using it. And therefore, there might be a need to use data and analytics to survey the customer. And we've introduced a technique for that, which is known as fit-for-purpose scoring, fit-for-purpose surveying, and the fitness box score. So the fit-for-purpose survey has some resemblance with Net Promoter Score, if you're familiar with that technique. But you'll also notice some differences. Question 1 says, tell us why you selected our product or service. And we've discovered that often customers have more than one reason, and they like to express more than one reason. We have seen some customers express up to 5 reasons. But as you'll see, we've decided to standardize on soliciting up to 3 reasons. It's beyond good enough. It captures more than 90, perhaps more than 98% of all responses. Then for each of the reasons you've indicated, tell us, did we meet your purpose or objective? Extremely, I got everything I needed and more. In other words, you've overserved me a bit. Or 4, I got everything I needed. You're highly fit for purpose. 3, mostly, I got most of what I needed, but there was a few things where it could have been better or the odd little thing that was missing, but I'm not upset about it. 2, partially, some of my purpose was met, but significant important elements were missing. 1, slightly, I took some value from what you were doing, but you know what? Yeah, it wasn't that good. And 0, of course, would be not at all. I got absolutely nothing useful. I've wasted my time and money, and I'm probably never coming back again. So based on your answer to number 2, question 2, tell us why you selected that answer. And this manifests itself on something we call the F4P card, or the Fit for Purpose card. And this is an example of how one would look. Give us up to 3 reasons, A, B, and C. And then for each of A, B, and C, my expectations were exceeded, they were fully met, mostly met with a few minor concerns. Some significant needs were unaddressed. I got some value, but you know what? I didn't really get what I was looking for, or I found nothing useful. And then tell us why. We take the answers to these surveys, and of course, what we do is we cluster them. We cluster them by purpose, the answers to question 1, and then we do data analysis on, for each purpose, each cluster, how did people respond? Are we meeting their needs? Are we exceeding their needs? Are we not meeting their needs? The answers to the question 2, are classified in this fashion. If someone answered a 4 or a 5, then we're fit for purpose. We've met or exceeded their expectations. A 5 would be exceeding, that we've overserved them. And you might want to analyze that later on. If most of what you're doing is fit for purpose, it would be good to separate out the 4s and 5s. But for now, we find that it's good enough to group those together. Satisfied customers. If someone answered with a 3, that's neutral. They got pretty much what they were looking for, but there was the odd thing that could have been better. They're satisfied enough. They feel there's room for improvement, but they're likely to come back again. Meanwhile, if they scored 2 or below, they're dissatisfied. And what we offered them was not fit for purpose. And then we group that stuff into what we call the fitness box score, which is illustrated at the bottom here, but the next slide shows it better. So we see here that the fitness box score, this is for one particular class run by Alexei Zheglov, was 74, 23, 3, 35, and then this 16, 20 at the end here. The 74 means that 74% of responses were positive. They were a 4 or a 5. People thought they got what they were looking for. 23% were neutral and 3% were dissatisfied. And there were a total of 35 purposes indicated. And of the 20 people who attended the class, 16 of them actually completed the survey. So from 16 completed surveys, we got a total of 35 purposes for attending. But actually those purposes can be clustered, and after a bit of clustering, they fall into these 6 categories. 5 that are valuable to us, and the 6th one which isn't. So first one, learning, I want to learn about Kanban. Second one, professional development, this is going to help my career. Third one, I just want the certificate, I want to be a Kanban management professional. Fourth one, Kanban's a new best practice and I need to know about best practices because our organization implements best practices. 5, a recommendation. Someone else took your class and said, wow, this was a great class, you should go to it. And then the 6th one basically collects all the other purposes that they weren't very coherent from our analysis. It was very difficult to understand exactly what is this person saying, or is there even coherence in what they've suggested was their purpose. So that, to some extent, the 6th category is noise in the signal. And then if we look at the individual segmentation analysis, we can see that people who came for learning about Kanban were 94% satisfied, fit for purpose, 6% neutral, 0% unfit for purpose. The person who wanted a certificate, it would appear to be only one person, and they were satisfied that they got the certificate. And so 1 out of 25% of the market was there purely to collect a certificate. On the other hand, what about recommendations, where 2 people had come to the class, 10% of the market, and they'd been told by someone else, this is a great class, you should go. Well, one of them was happy and the other one was neutral. At least they're not unhappy. And then we've got this dysfunctional segment. It was 5 people out of 20, that's 25%. It's enough to be concerning. And you can see that most of those people were neutral in their response. One was satisfied, one was dissatisfied. The problem with a dysfunctional segment like that is you've no idea why they're coming. They don't even really know why they're coming. It's very difficult for us to take any action, where with some of these other segments, there's clear indication that we're doing reasonably well. But there's enough neutral in this particular survey that there's room for some improvement. So I will make some conclusions here, and then we'll open it up for questions. I've really only skimmed the surface of the content of the book. So every product or service has a design, an implementation, and service delivery. And customers care about all 3 of these. They care about the design elements, the menu for the pizza restaurant, the concept of the restaurant, the atmosphere if they're visiting the restaurant, the decor. They care about the implementation. How good are you at baking pizzas? How good quality are the ingredients? And they care about service delivery. Now, we're showing a delivery boy here who's bringing a pizza to your home or your office. But if you were sitting in the restaurant, the service delivery is your experience with the waiter and how quickly they bust the table, how attentive the service is, how friendly the staff are, your experience of consumption. So design, the concept, the specification, implementation, the how and how well, and service delivery, your experience of consumption. You could think of some other examples. If you're flying, design is what type of aircraft, which class of service, how comfortable is the seat, what's the food like, which airport did it fly from. Implementation is highly regulated in the airline industry. You know, was the pilot qualified? Were the flight attendants qualified? And did the aircraft take off on time and land on time, those kind of things. And the service delivery, your experience of consumption, the check-in experience, the security experience. If you have business or first class, how was the lounge? The boarding experience. Once you're on board, what was your experience with the flight attendants? How attentive were they? How friendly were they? How helpful were the staff? What happened if something went wrong? If you were taken ill on board, how well did they deal with that? All of these things are the service delivery. There are 4 types of metrics: fitness criteria, improvement drivers, general health indicators, and vanity metrics. And it would be a good idea to take a look at what do we measure and ask, why do we measure it? What's it for? Is it a fitness criteria? Does it drive selection? Does it have a threshold of fitness? If it doesn't, it probably isn't a fitness criteria. Can you identify a customer purpose for which it satisfies? And if so, what's the threshold and how would you measure it? If you're not really sure, how would you determine it? And what's the second threshold? At what point would you be over-serving that market? If it's not a fitness criteria, isn't an improvement driver? Are you actively trying to hit a target? And is that causing you to change your processes, change your capabilities, and improve your organization or the skills and capabilities of your employees? If not, is it a general health indicator? Is it like the cash register ringing? Is it the concept that you have a pulse or a blood pressure? And if so, what's a healthy range of variability? How would you know whether if it's changed significantly, is that an indicator of something bad that's happening in your environment and you should go look for a reason why? And finally, if it's none of those 3, it may well be a vanity metric. Is it something that makes you feel good? Do you like to boast about it? Is it on your website? Do you announce it to all your customers at the end of the service delivery and say, hey, how good are we? We're the most punctual airline in the world. And is more always better? Because if it is, probably a vanity metric, because there's no such thing as a perfect pulse, and more isn't always better. An improvement driver always has a target, and a fitness criteria always has a threshold. If your metric doesn't have a healthy range, a target to be achieved, or a threshold beyond which you become fit or acceptable or satisfactory, if it doesn't have those, it's a vanity metric. And therefore ask yourself, why do I care? What is it about me or my organizational culture that makes me obsess around this metric? And why are we focused on it while we're not focused on fitness criteria that drive customer satisfaction? There are 4 very common fitness criteria in almost all businesses: delivery time, quality, both functional and non-functional, predictability, and safety or conformance requirements. If you don't have a lot of information about your existing market, your existing customers, if you don't have a front line that's trained to chat up your customers and find their narrative, understand their purpose, have some opinion about the thresholds, if you don't have fit-for-purpose surveys and fitness box scores, if you have none of that, a great place to start is with these 4 metrics. What do they mean for you? What do they mean in your market? Delivery time, quality, predictability, and safety. And given your customer base, your market segmentation, what are the threshold values? Fantastic exercise to go through and ask yourself. So a reminder that the new book, Fit for Purpose, How Modern Businesses Find, Satisfy, and Keep Customers, it's available from online booksellers from November. Finding customers, identifying market segments from clustering narratives, identifying what those customers need, and then designing your products and services with the right design, implementation, and service delivery such that you satisfy them. And if you satisfy them adequately and you keep sensing, you keep running those fit-for-purpose reviews, and you keep challenging yourself with the right fitness criteria, metrics, the right improvement drivers, you monitor health indicators, then you'll continue to improve, you'll continue to satisfy customers, and that's how you keep them. You keep your customers loyal by delivering products and services that are fit for purpose, products and services with sufficiently good design, implementation, and service delivery. And with that, thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Mahesh for some questions.
Thank you, David. A very interesting and fascinating session as usual. Let me start with a question that I myself had, and Jay Paulson has also asked that in a manner. So let me start with his question. Is the fitness for purpose review going to be added to the Kanban feedback loops? And my sort of extension to that is that overall, would you explain how this fits, if it does, and I'm sure it does, in the overall Kanban method and the use of enterprise services planning?
Okay, well, fair questions. For those who are not familiar, there's a concept called the Kanban cadences, where we define 7 feedback mechanisms: the Kanban meeting, the replenishment meeting for the Kanban, the delivery planning meeting, service delivery review, which is a way of retrospecting how good is an individual service, risk review, which looks at things that affect our ability to deliver with predictability, and the operations review, which is at the network level, where we have a product unit, and our product unit's a network of interdependent services. We have an operations review for improving the dependencies between services. The 7th one is called strategy review, and depending on your scale, a relatively small scale, the fit for purpose review is part of the strategy review. And if you have a much larger scale, fit for purpose review is a preparatory meeting for the strategy review. In the text of the book, we describe larger scale implementations where perhaps you gather together the frontline staff a few days prior, a week, 2 weeks prior to the strategy review meeting with executives. The frontline staff go through the exercise. You identify new customer segments. You might identify existing ones that perhaps should be retired. You update your understanding of fitness criteria, and then you bring those results to the strategy review meeting. And ideally, you have some of the frontline staff, perhaps you select a couple of frontline staff who were in the fit for purpose review. You have them come to the strategy review and present the results to the executives. You don't allow some middle manager from marketing to do it. You want to create this direct connection between the frontline staff and the executives. It has authenticity that way, and if the executives have questions, they can ask directly. It doesn't need to be a second-hand response. So fit for purpose review is a subset of the strategy review. So we're not modifying the Kanban cadences. It's either a proprietary meeting on its own, or it's an active part of the strategy review, and that's how it's documented.
Okay, perfect. There's a question from Shaheen Shedai. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. This came during the early part of your presentation when you're describing Neeta's fit for purpose criteria different in work at the workplace versus at home. His question is, could you elaborate on the non-functional quality of hot? Can we categorize it as a functional quality and define what exactly is the definition of hot, that is more than 15 degrees Celsius? So basically, how do you qualify some of the conditions that you have?
All right, so it's a very technical question on non-functional requirements, to which you're probably better referred to a book on non-functional requirement definition, something like Gauss and Weinberg, maybe, from the 1990s, or Tom Gilby book, perhaps, on how to define ranges for something. But I think the essence of it is that Neeta knows whether it's hot or not. Neeta's geeks know whether it's hot, and people are complaining that it's hot or it's not hot enough. A business would investigate that, how hot is hot enough, and they would be able to determine their own threshold for it. That there is obviously that it's more important to know the mechanism for how you determine the threshold. That I can't imagine us producing a catalogue for every single industry of how to determine thresholds for non-functional requirements. But it's worth pointing out that it's a non-trivial skill, right? It's a higher level of capability for product managers and business analysts, system analysts, to be able to specify ranges for non-functional quality. But for example, say you're running a website and you want the customer expects pages to load within a certain period of time. The customer will tell you page loading is too slow. And you can monitor, what were the page load times for that customer, and if it was 25 seconds, okay, 25 seconds is not good enough. And another customer who's not complaining about it, maybe their page load times were 3 seconds. So now 25 is not good enough and 3 seconds is good enough. So the threshold's somewhere in between the two, and you probe a little further into your data set to get some idea of where the boundaries are.
All right. Let me take another question from Shaheen. It says that the NPS score of 9 or higher is considered a promoter. A 7 and 8 are considered passive. In your F4P model, you're basically considering 7, 8, 9, and 10 the promoters or people that find great value in it. Can you elaborate on this?
I think that you're jumping to all sorts of conclusions there. Net Promoter Score is a whole different animal. There is almost an entire chapter in the book dedicated to Net Promoter Score. And I chose not to talk about it today, but Net Promoter Score is asking the question, would you recommend us to someone else? And it's asking the customer to speculate on their own behavior. So it's not even asking for a factual response, it's asking for a speculation about future behavior, where the Fit for Purpose survey is asking for a factual response. What was your purpose in engaging with our product or service? The customer knows that. It's not speculation because it's historical. They understand, I had my 4 kids to feed, and I was working late, and I've been stressed all week, and I haven't been to the grocery store, and I ordered pizza because I was exhausted and the kids were hungry. They know their purpose, so it's factual. And then, did we meet your purpose or not? Again, that's a factual question. We're not asking for speculation. They know whether they feel satisfied or not. And then tell us why. Tell us why you feel satisfied or not. So we're not suggesting for a moment that someone who believes your product is fit for purpose is a promoter. These two questions are different, right? And there's an entire chapter on the book that explains this in some detail. There may be a correlation that someone believes your product is fit for purpose and they'll also promote, but it's jumping to conclusions. That you shouldn't make the assumption that because someone believes that you're fit for purpose, they're also going to promote you.
All right. This is a question from Martin Aziz. Question is, aren't vanity metrics sometimes important? Could be strongly connected to company identity. For example, Ferrari winning F1.
So if Ferrari wins the Formula One World Championship, that isn't a vanity metric. That's a fitness criteria. The time it takes you to run the Boston Marathon, that's a fitness criteria. The position that the Oakland Athletics finish in Major League Baseball at the end of the year, whether they make the playoffs or not, that's a fitness criteria. If the fans believe that the general manager, the head coach, the team are good enough to win enough games to make the playoffs at the end of the season, they're quite likely to buy season tickets. They're likely to buy a lot of replica uniforms and other fan memorabilia and materials. The revenues of the club and its long-term success and survivability are based on how well it performs in the competition. That's a fitness criteria. But the first part of the question, are vanity metrics important because they're often tied to identity or culture? Yes. The answer to that is yes. But you have to ask the deeper question of, why are you so vain? Why do you care about this? There's an entire section in the book on this topic of feel-good metrics. Why does it make you feel good? Why are you obsessing about it when it isn't a selection criteria? So to use the baseball analogy, and there's a reasonable coverage of this in the book, until the Oakland Athletics changed baseball in 2002, in terms of attacking metrics, the obsession was with batting average. How often does a player hit the ball? When it turns out that the real selection criteria, the fitness criteria, something that determines whether you win a baseball game or not, whether you qualify for the playoffs or not, and therefore whether you should select a player for your roster, is on-base percentage. On-base percentage was the fitness criteria. Batting average was merely a vanity metric. And for that matter, in the 2002 season, the Oakland Athletics set an all-time record of 20 wins without a defeat, a run of 20 wins undefeated. And that was the longest undefeated in the American Baseball League, the American League. So that's great. The fans feel great. We won more games in a row than anyone has ever won. They didn't win the championship at the end of the season. They qualified for the playoffs. 20 wins definitely helped. But the fact they had a winning streak of 20 games in a row, vanity metric. So vanity metrics make you feel good, and self-esteem is important, but it's not predicting whether you'll be successful in the market. It's not predicting survivability. And you could continue to be feeling good for a long time, and then all of a sudden you find you're out of business because you weren't focused on things customers cared about. Airlines that care about punctuality, for example, if you followed the news over the last 2 weeks with Ryanair cancelling flights in order to improve their punctuality metric, well, I'm sure the customers who were on those cancelled flights don't feel too happy or satisfied about it.
Hey. All right. I know we are running fairly over time, but let me take a couple of more questions and then we will end. David, I hope that's okay with you as well. There's one more question from Martin, which I think is important for the audience. In knowledge work of the three elements of the F4P, design through service delivery, is there a distribution that you know of or is in your experience of where the biggest problems are?
I don't know that I've seen data, but purely anecdotally, my observation is that high-tech industries obsess with design, and they tend to reward individuals who innovate with design, where someone who innovates with implementation, say a different way of doing something or automation, that gets some respect, but not nearly as much as someone who innovates in design. While service delivery tends to get ignored. So there tends to be a focus on ever more innovation in design and potentially over-serving customers with more and more features, where perhaps the customer would actually prefer an improvement in implementation, like faster, for example, or faster page load for the website, rather than more features on the web page. And the service delivery, the experience of interacting or consuming the product or service often gets overlooked completely, perhaps because it's the most human part of the overall product or service. And many people in the high-tech sector, they love machines, they love the nice sort of control feeling of the machine does what I tell it. Human beings, on the other hand, they're a bit more complex. But I haven't seen any data. It would be very interesting to see someone survey or gather that kind of data, and perhaps you'll see an evolution of the fit-for-purpose surveying, where we start to break out design from implementation, from service delivery, in order to get a better feel for which companies and which industries are doing better in each of those three segments. I think there's an opportunity there for Martin to do a bit of innovation in the survey method and produce new data for us, bring it to our conferences. That sounds a pretty interesting direction to take fit for purpose and fitness box score. Excellent.
Hope, Martin, you will be able to join us in one of these conferences and share some of the data. Let me take one last question from James Testier. How does Lean Kanban compare to Agile Scrum relative to fit for purpose for software development?
I'm not sure that I understand that question. I'm not sure how the whole concept of fit for purpose is to be able to evaluate, was a change an improvement, and was a change to our design specification an improvement, was a change to the way we perform our implementation an improvement, and was the was the way that we delivered that, the service delivery, the way that our customer experienced consumption of what we're doing, improving or not, and your ability to improve and how quickly you might improve will determine how well you survive in the market. So if you happen to be using the Kanban method and you are surviving and thriving, then Kanban's clearly helping you with those improvements. And if you're using Scrum, you will have your own survey results that will tell you whether your customers are satisfied or not. And if they're not, at some point you might have to say, are there problems with our implementation? Are there problems with our service delivery? And if so, what will we do about it? Does that require us to change the way that we're going about implementation and service delivery? And asking those deep questions. But regardless of whatever processes or methods, management methods you might have in your organization, the fit for purpose survey is telling you whether you're fit for purpose. It's entirely agnostic to Scrum or Kanban.
I would agree with that. I think we are way over time here, and I think we need to close the webinar. Any closing thoughts from your side?
I'd like to thank everyone for coming once again, and you should look for the book towards the end of November from online retailers, and through our usual social media channels we'll make the announcements when it's available.
Perfect. Thank you so much for doing the webinar today. Thank you to all the attendees who have stayed back till the end here, and I hope that you enjoyed the webinar and the Q&A session. I'd like to invite you to connect with David or with the Digitative Kanban for any follow-up questions and interest you might have in either of those two areas. And I would love to hear from you. Once again, thank you all for being here, and we will share the recording of the webinar in a day or two at the latest. Let us know. Thanks a lot, everybody, and goodbye.